Hello, my name is Julian Weyer from CF Møller Architects. I'd like to talk about the Nordic cities today. Nordic cities like Copenhagen, Stockholm, Oslo, and many others are well known today for their livability, attractiveness of the cityscape, and the innovation and new ideas that thrive there. But you have to look at the history of how this evolved, because it was not always this way. Basically, what you see today is that these Nordic cities, which were originally, in the most cases, coastal cities at the end of fjords, rivers, etc., or right on the coast itself, they were founded because of the naval trade, the connections to the world via the sea. But all of that, which was a quality and gave the cities their identity, has also become sort of a threat today with climate change and adaptation. So these cities are under a transformative pressure, which has become an opportunity, a chance to actually develop new ideas and new qualities, bringing together the necessities of climate adaptation and resilience, the social change and demographic change that happens, and at the same time also the ambitious goals of being CO2 neutral in a short time span within 5, 10 or 15 years. So this is something which really pushes the innovation in the city, something that demands a high level of investment, and at the same time became a chance to develop new ways of bringing together the Nordic tradition of social sustainability with ecological sustainability and an economic viability, a way to do things. A city like Copenhagen, for example, which is today hailed as one of the most livable and attractive cities in the world year after year, a mere 25, 30 years ago was hardly that attractive. It was actually a city which was fairly run down and which many people were leaving at that time. So it's a conscious reinvention of the cityscape which has made it possible. And some of the tools that have been used here is this idea, which is prevalent in the Nordic society, is that architecture and urbanism, and especially the urban realm, are tools of social innovation, something that's critical to achieve the positive change that we're looking for. One thing we particularly believe in, are really passionate about, is this idea that bringing urbanism, landscape, natural values, and architecture together into one. This is something that is coming out of the Nordic tradition of trying to think cross-disciplinary, but it's also something that we see has a huge potential to change the way that our urbanism works, because we have this enormous mega trend of people moving into cities. So in the long run, this is absolutely a necessity for us. And therefore, it's something that we try to incorporate in any work that we do, whether it's from the housing, healthcare, public projects, private projects, commercial projects. All of this has the potential to create something new and special out of this thinking, and sometimes to turn things upside down and start with the consideration of urbanism and landscape before moving into the actual architectural design. So we really see this as something that has the potential to leverage the thinking, the triple bottom line, and at the same time creating something which is really perceivably more attractive to the people of the Nordic cities. What we also see is that there's a new and very important drive to consider how we can reinstate nature as part of urban cityscapes. The Nordic cities are driven by the same demographic trends that we see all over the world, where urbanization is a mega trend and is something that is rapidly changing how we live and what kind of our communities we can create. And in the long run, we simply have to adapt nature into this new urbanism, because we need it as humans, but we also need biodiversity to be able to develop in new ways in our cities. So when you look at urban planning today, it's really a question of how can we create new natural values as we increase urbanity, as we increase density in cities, and how can we avoid just gobbling up new land and instead looking at the brownfields and what kind of ecological values can be created there. A good example of this thinking is the Panum Institute in Copenhagen, where the task was to insert a large volume of over 40,000 square meters of new construction in a central urban site. But where it was possible to actually create a better urban situation after this new building was added than we had before, Because of the use of a tower typology, which made it possible to condense the building, a new green campus could be created where there never was one before, and new connections in the cityscape could be created. So it became an opportunity to demonstrate how densification and urbanization of cities doesn't necessarily have to contradict the idea of creating more greenery and better urban lungs. At the same time, cities are intricately linked to changes in the construction industry and achieving CO2 neutrality in new ways. So, for instance, in the case of Finland, Norway, and Sweden, where there's a strong link to the timber industry, we also see a drive towards timber construction that we are an important part of. For instance, completed Sweden's tallest timber building at 9 stories, which is an entirely timber-based building, no, not a hybrid building. The idea is to show that not only this can be achieved, but actually it can be a feasible everyday architecture and in many ways actually surpass traditional construction methods in terms of speed and economics. So with the Nordic cities being predominantly coastal cities, as I said, it means that they're exposed to all the effects of climate change, whether it be rising sea levels or increased rainfall, which causes rivers to swell, in many ways threatens the city because they are positioned exactly where fjords, rivers, and coastlines meet. But that can also be turned into an opportunity. There's a chance there to actually reinvent the cities as part of this transformative process. An example of that, the river city in Vannes, which is something which we've been working with for years, trying to create not just a protective system, something that will actually allow the city to thrive and adapt itself to climate resilient solutions, but using that to always create an added value in terms of urbanism, of urban spaces, but also identity for the city. So showing that these necessary investments, which can be quite substantial, do not necessarily have to be lost on invisible infrastructure or new barriers, but it's actually something that can create new opportunities, urban spaces, which are also of a sudden becomes changeable with the seasons, sometimes wet, sometimes dry, which becomes an added quality. The way the city can introduce nature right into its heart, combine that with new ways of living and housing, is actually something that can turn a development around and create an entirely new approach for how our future urbanism can look. Part of that can be the idea of actually using natural areas to become part of our infrastructure, using them to cleanse water and at the same time create new biodiversity opportunities, turning meadows into wetlands, which then again become part of a larger circular system, protecting the city from floods, etc. So there's a chance to make integrated ideas which benefit not just the people living in the city, but the whole organism. When we talk about infrastructure, which can be quite a substantial investment, the key is to always see that as a chance to create something else, that extra added value. When you look at a city like Copenhagen, where you can today bathe in the harbor because it is clean and it has bathing water quality, or you can ski on a waste incineration plant, that's really an example of this integrated thinking. And we're always looking for new opportunities to push that and bring the public realm into play whenever these investments are made. And that can be whether it's about transport and mobility hubs like our ferry terminal in Stockholm, where ports, which are today not as accessible as they used to be because of security requirements, you can hardly sort of take a walk along the quay anymore. But all of a sudden, by layering things and introducing a green park as a roof of a new ferry terminal, it becomes possible to again access these areas, which are highly attractive, and at the same time actually provide amenities to the city itself. Or central Oslo, or central stations all around the Nordic cities. A lot of these places we are working with projects where we are looking to both densify and increase the functionality of urban mobility hubs like central stations, but at the same time turn them around. There used to be something that took away from the city, took away area, took away clean air, etc. All of these challenges are now being reversed into something positive and a new chance of urban development, a new chance of creating a center which is meaningful and which has fantastic qualities combined with this mobility, which makes it really valuable. And infrastructure doesn't have to be just trains and boats and planes, etc. Actually, it's a lot of cases we are also talking the invisible infrastructure which ties our cities together. So it's the grids, the amenities, water, electricity, etc. we as architects become involved in actually designing these grids and designing the buildings for those, and becomes part of this endeavor to always create that extra value for the cities. And at the same time, it becomes our chance, our lever to achieve climate neutrality as these cities have made as goals for themselves, ambitious goals, which is possible because we have these comprehensive grid structures where the input can be controlled. An example how these things can come together and create something exciting is in the town of Hillerød, where we've created an amenity park. The idea being that you bring all these mundane things together: energy production, wastewater cleaning, recycling, all these practical things come together and actually form a new green park, which is both a public attraction, a place for learning, but is actually also capable of absorbing enormous amounts of stormwater from the surrounding urban developments. So it really is such an example of circularity and circular thinking, bringing together all these different problems and trying to create a solution which goes far beyond just the mere practical. And when we work as architects with these buildings of the welfare society, what really becomes clear and is a driving force for us is this Nordic tradition of coming from the Nordic modern, of a human approach to architecture and urbanism, which sees those as essential tools, as I said in the start, tools of social mobility, tools of social change. This is something that pervades the way we work with architecture. So it is not just the important public projects, places of learning, schools, universities, etc. It is also the private sector projects who take on board these values and show no routes to go. And you can see that strongly expressed in projects like the Copenhagen International School, which takes advantage of the port of Copenhagen now having bathing water quality. So it's literally put inside the port basin. It's part of the new urban development. It's a pioneering project for the urban development that is to come. But it's also a school which teaches sustainability as its curriculum. So it goes all the way from the greenhouses on the roof terraces, building itself, which is a clever way of putting together a low energy circularity building, and right down to the fact that you both have access to the waters, can tell the stories of the oceans, but the entire building is clad in solar cells, one of the largest building integrated solar plants in Europe, as part of this whole idea that sustainability can be expressed and be learned. And it's not just the public projects. As I said, it's also the private sector projects. The same playfulness and the same curiosity and the same thinking about sort of how can this added value be integrated not just with the users, but also with the wider society, is something that is driving projects like the new central offices for companies like Carlsberg or Lego, where we've designed buildings which interact with their surroundings, buildings which are embedded in public landscapes, something that gives back to the city and creates new green urban space where it wasn't before. And at the same time, it simply brings together organizations in a new way, and it shows that this idea of how society works is something that also pervades the values of individual companies. And seeing how far this can be brought, an example is a project like The Heart, where you see a building which originated as an extension of a school building, and it can function as a school and is used as a school, but at the same time, it is so much more. So this idea of hybridization, where actually the building provides room for a lot of different user groups, different activities throughout the day and throughout the year, and becomes a joint effort between public and private to create something that really lifts the community and brings everybody on board and includes people. It's a very, very good example of the values that are driving these Nordic societies and the values that we see characterizing the Nordic cities. And in a way, something that addresses the problems that have to be faced and the investments that have to be made, and tries to turn that into something which really has an exemplary force, not just within the society of the Scandinavian countries, but also worldwide. Thanks for listening.